I'm assuming you all are here for the New Girl references and not here at all for the AI component of things. If you're here for the AI component of things, you should really walk out right now. Like, this is 80% New Girl gifts, so I hope everyone's completely cool with that. No joke, this is actually called New Girl, but Jess is a chatbot. AI joins the data team's loft. I tried to explain this to my mom, and she still does not get it. But I hope everyone enjoys. We're a sponsored talk, but we're not going to be selling anything. So that means we only have 20 minutes to talk, so we probably won't have time at the end. But come by our booth after. We're the ones giving out the bucket hats. So if you want to come make a bucket hat with me, I can't think of any better way to spend a beautiful afternoon. So if you all want to have any follow-up questions or just even want to tell me what your favorite song of all time is, I'd rather have that conversation than talk about data. So, all right, here we go. Let's start off with some introductions here.
All right, I'm Alex Gronemeyer, lead data engineer at Airbyte.
Is your mic on?
Yeah, it is. Is this, can you hear me? No. I'm Alex Gronemeyer.
Man, they're really trying to take away our 20 minutes here, guys. Come on. The sabotage is killing me.
All right, Alex Gronemeyer, lead data engineer at Airbyte.
It wasn't even worth passing the mic for that. Hey, my name's Anil Maharjan. I am a senior data analyst at Airbyte. I actually forgot my title for a second there, so I had to look down. And then we have one mystery member of our team, which we will talk about shortly. But for anyone who does not understand what is going on here, I'm going to explain the reference. Okay? I hope you all get it. If you don't get it, I'm sorry. The next 14 minutes are going to be brutal for you. All right, so we'll walk you through this in a painful amount of depth soon. But essentially, the third member of our team is what we like to call our junior data analyst, Dot. Not only is Dot cute, but Dot is an AI chatbot that is supporting the growth of our data team. Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit more, but if you see a random fox, that is Dot. All right. I put this in here because we were told to put this in here. Why should you care? You're obviously here, so you know why you should care. But to be honest with you, I'm sure you're all very similar to us. You have lots of questions that are being asked to you and not enough time to answer it. And then the second part is your manager, your manager's manager, your board of directors has probably asked you, how are you going to use AI? And you're laughing nervously because you don't know what to say. But you will know what to say. Soon enough. But yes, there's this whole AI train going on right now. We were really pushed to try to figure out how to incorporate AI, and we didn't know how. But this is how we approached it. All right.
So I'll talk you through our tech stack. We use an open data stack, but we use all the cloud versions of all of these open source products. So of course we use Airbyte Cloud to ingest all of our data from our various sources into BigQuery. We use dbt Cloud for all of our data transformations, and this is how we create our business tables. We're going to talk a lot about business tables today. You might refer to these as marts or something else in your organization. Basically, these are just the final tables that we're creating with dbt that are used for data visualization and analytics. And then we're using Metabase Cloud for all of our data visualization. This helps the people at Airbyte do a lot of self-serve with their data visualization today. There we go. So this is just another view of our data stack. This is how everything flows together. Again, all of our business tables live in BigQuery, and these are really valuable assets. We've spent a lot of time curating these tables. This is where Anil and I spend most of our time trying to create business value at Airbyte. And so we were thinking, how can we leverage our existing data stack to help us solve this problem of having too many data questions to answer and not enough people or time? And so this is where Dot comes into play. So we are able to hook up this ChatGPT-based chatbot directly to our business tables and leverage all of the existing work that we've already done. A few more things to know about our situation. Like I mentioned, we have a really well-defined business layer already. So this helps answer everyday questions in Metabase, but it's not super great for ad hoc questions that don't already have dashboards built. The people who work at Airbyte tend to have a higher data IQ. People are really comfortable with SQL and like diving into raw data. So that's something that we had to consider when we were trying to figure out how to solve this problem. And then Airbyte is a startup, and so the velocity of change is really high. It's really difficult to know when new data has made it into a business table or not, and that's a problem that Anil and I struggle with and our end users struggle with too. So Neil's gonna talk about recap our problem of what we're trying to solve.
All right, and if nothing else, everyone pull out your phones so we have the great takeaway here. We have 2 data people and hundreds of questions to answer. So more specifically, what are we trying to solve? It's not just a question of a volume, or it's not just a volume of questions that we're dealing with. There's first the discoverability issue that Alex was talking about. We, and I'll pat ourselves on the back, we've done a phenomenal job of creating these business tables, but is all of the data easily discoverable by people? The second piece is the ChatGPT problem. And it's kind of ironic that I'm saying that this is a problem, but there are a couple things that just using ChatGPT on its own is going to hold you back from. The first is it doesn't train on data specific to our company, right? Our database, hopefully, is not sitting out in the public where ChatGPT can go train on it. And so by not having access to our data, what our engineers end up having to do is pass our data into a ChatGPT conversation. And in addition to that, we have no oversight over the questions being asked. So one, we don't know the most common questions being asked, and the second thing is, we don't know if ChatGPT is outputting the right answer. And then finally, as if we haven't harped on this enough, Alex and I are currently the data team at Airbyte. So these sort of small questions can pretty significantly derail more important projects. So in order to kind of transition into the meat of this, let's talk about the process that we broke down into kind of 3 sections: vendor search, security, testing, and rollout. One of the pieces that we have talked about a lot is when you are starting to look for a vendor, like what do you even type into Google? We had some success, and we had chat with your data warehouse, data analysis AI chat, list of AI data analysis. But honestly, we also, with very similar terms, had some really, really bad results. So we're just sharing this with you all so you don't have to go down the same path of having to scroll through 3 pages of paid ads in order to begin to find anything even remotely useful. All right? But there's also there's kind of this important, what does your team actually need? And to be very honest with you, we didn't think about this question until we went through some of the early vendor analysis. So some of the questions that we had to consider, the first is build versus buy. And to be honest with you, it would absolutely be possible to build something like this yourself. But we didn't have the technical capabilities or the time in order to do so. And that's why we were going down this route of buying. The second thing is, what types of questions will your team be asking? Are they going to be heavily focused on just how many opportunities did we have last week? Or are they going to be more focused on questions like, do we have X or Y data? In addition to that, you also want to be thinking about visualization capabilities. We already use Metabase, and what we wanted to avoid was introducing an AI chatbot that was going to bring in additional visualization capabilities, because that was just going to cause a whole nother headache for us. And then also, I wrote what are your data sources, but where is your data living, quite honestly? What you'll also find is that many of these AI chatbot vendors, what they'll do is they'll pick maybe 1 data warehouse or 2 data warehouses that they'll integrate really well with. So this is an important thing to think about if you're really concerned about plug and play. And then finally, how will your team interact with the bot? Are they cool with going on, get.ai, or are they primarily living in Slack? For us, we were primarily living in Slack all the time, and that was another important point of why we chose our particular vendor. All right, Alex, on security.
Yeah, so everyone's favorite topic, security. We take security very seriously at Airbyte, and this is one of the more time-consuming parts of this process, is figuring out which vendors we felt were secure enough to even start integrating our data with. So we met with our security engineer and talked through a few different questions, like some of the basic ones: what privacy policies and security certifications do the vendors have in place? Where is the application data being stored? Who has access to it? And then do we have any sensitive data in our data warehouse that we need to be concerned with sharing with third-party tools? Wait, Anil, do we have any sensitive data in our data warehouse?
I'm not 100% sure, but based on the fact that there's 5 more slides on it, I'm going to say that we do.
Yeah, we absolutely do. So we went down the whole path of anonymizing data. So we'll share some tips for you here if you need to go through a similar journey. First, we needed to identify what data we even cared about anonymizing, what was okay to share. For us, this was email address and full name. This is what we would consider PII. We don't have a lot of PII, but we have an email address pretty much everywhere. So that was a big effort for us. We had to figure out where this existed. It was in really obvious places like columns called email, but it also showed up in places like Salesforce account name. So there were a few things that we had to go through to figure out where this existed. And then we needed a long-term plan. This wasn't just like a one-time mask your data and you're good to go. Like, we are constantly ingesting new sources, and we needed to make sure that we were handling this all the time. So we chose to mask all of the PII at the staging level in DBT, and I'll go into a little more detail about that here. So you're probably familiar with a view like this if you're using DBT. All of our source data is in like a green box like that, and then all of our staging models come directly after. We actually have a valid use case internally for keeping things like email address around, and so we didn't want to like mask it too early and then not be able to use it downstream. But the staging model in DBT turned out to be the right place for us. We can mask all of the data in our staging models, and then it flows downstream, and we don't have to worry about passing email address into any of our business tables. And then the way that we did this, we created a macro called hash column. This just ensures that we are masking the data at the same time. Every single column that we need to mask, it happens the same way every single time. And yeah, this made it really easy. You can see where we are, hashing email. This is in pretty much every staging model where email shows up. And then the next piece of this, I mentioned we want to be able to mask data that comes in, tomorrow when we get a new data source. And so we created DBT tests to help us find PII that we might not know exists. So this contains email test, just uses, it loops through every column in every table, and uses a regex to check for email address. This was super helpful in finding that email address, like I mentioned, Salesforce account name. We actually didn't know it was there at the beginning. So this helped us identify other columns that we needed to mask. And then we're able to simply call this test on any business table. So it ensures that we're not accidentally passing PII to ChatGPT when we're not intending to. So our new and improved business tables are now secure, and we can move on to the testing and rollout piece.
All right, perfect. Okay, so, I warned you all before that there's a really good slide to take a picture of and send to your manager to justify them sending you to San Diego. Once I finish this slide, I'll stop for about 10 seconds. That's the one you take the picture of and you send to your manager, all right? So let's walk through how we actually did this rollout here. So the first piece was obviously the data team. And what we did is we focused on a single anonymized table in a private Slack channel. So what we did is we very specifically chose an event table. If you know about Airbyte, essentially what we do is we help sync data from sources to destinations. And so what we focus on is we focus on our table that had one row for every single sync job that occurred. And what was really great about that is that allowed us to aggregate up, give really granular information as necessary. And so we found that it worked out really well, but we didn't go through the full PII work at that point. We literally just masked a couple columns and started working from there. Once we started moving the data power users in, that's when we really had to remove all the PII from our business tables and introduce all of these tables to Dot. And one of the big things here is this is likely going to take you a lot more time than you're expecting. There are components of this that Alex mentioned in just a minute, but think about the fact that you have to go through defining what your PII is, finding it, masking it, making sure you have rules in place so that you're not accidentally passing this data. So while this is a nice sequential process, this second piece here is something you should really start on right from the beginning. The next piece was our volunteer beta testers. And while our company is fully remote, one of the really awesome things is we happen to all be together one week. And so we started pulling in people from all different parts of the org to start testing out our bot. And what we found there, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more depth when we go through the demo, is documentation is really clear, is really important here. Think about the fact your data tables are not sitting out in the open internet. There is no context for your chatbot to figure out what is going on unless you're explicitly telling it. All right, so like I said, be specific and also make sure you have people from all different parts of the business trying this out. The questions that were being asked by our data power users were a lot different than our engineers and a lot different than our RevOps people. And of course, the rollout to all users, and I wish I could say that this was already done, but the fun part is we were doing all of this in real time as we were making this presentation. So what we'll be doing is we'll be rolling this out to a public Slack channel. And what's really important here is to set expectations appropriately. AI, it could mean anything. And you need to set the expectations around how to ask questions, what questions are appropriate, what data the chatbot has access to, because otherwise you're going to end up with potentially people with too high expectations, too low expectations. So expectation setting here is a really important component. And now, I guess we should probably show you a little bit about how this works.
All right, so one of the reasons we ended up choosing Dot is because, as we mentioned at the beginning, we have all of our data in BigQuery, and we want people to ask questions in Slack. That's where all of the people in our company are spending most of their time. So I just wanted to show this page to show you all the different integrations that were available in Dot. It took about 30 minutes to set this up. I mean, we passed a service account for BigQuery. You set up a user in Slack. This part was super easy. As we mentioned, the security piece of this took a lot of time, and adding in documentation took a lot of time, but getting this set up and running was really painless. And one of the cool features you can see, you might have Snowflake or Redshift. There's also dbt semantic layer coming soon, so that's really exciting for our team. Once you load up all your data in BigQuery, this is just a list of all of the tables that it has access to. And you can see that the descriptions are already populating here. If you have dbt documentation, it will pull in those descriptions. And this is actually what the web UI looks like. So there's a chat functionality that you can use here. We don't really use this because, like I mentioned, we're primarily using Slack. What's cool about this page is you can deselect tables if you don't want them to be used in any answers. And so we have a few tables that are more metadata and, I don't know, dbt tests and things like that. So we don't need those to be used for answering questions. So we can just deselect those, which is super helpful. From that page, you can click into a table and actually edit the documentation. So I mentioned it will pull in your dbt documentation. You can also edit it directly in the chatbot. And so it also has a auto-generate feature. So there's a few tables where we had no documentation, and we just used an auto-generate feature to help us get up and running. One of the things that we learned about these chatbots, because it's using a ChatGPT model, it does really well with directions in the documentation, and this is something that we hadn't really documented before. It seems kind of weird to put directions in your documentation, like always do this or never do that, but ChatGPT responds really well to that, and so we learned we can add things into our documentation. In this case, we did always ask if users want to filter for cloud connections. You can also say, always use this table to answer this type of question. That's been super useful. That's the part that Anil and I are working on right now, is making sure that all of our tables have those types of directives. And then I'll read this to you, so don't worry if you can't see it. This is what it's like to chat with Dot in Slack. You tag Dot just like they're a person in your company, and then you ask your question. So for this one, what is the busiest hour of the day for cloud syncs? When Anil and I are testing this, we're using real questions that people are asking us in our normal Ask Data channel, and we're passing them into our test channel. And then Dot answers within a few seconds. It tells you, I'll break down the pieces of this answer for you. So it tells you the table that it's referencing. This is super helpful to figure out, is it even picking the right table to answer this question? And if not, that's a sign for Anil and I to go into our documentation and update those always use a table or never use a table statements. It explains the logic behind the query. So if you have users who aren't as familiar with SQL, they don't need to dig into the SQL query to figure out what's going on. It gives you a nice English description of what's happening. It might give you a data visualization depending on what question you ask. So we mentioned we didn't want a robust data visualization capability, but this is kind of nice for just understanding your answer a little bit quicker. And then you can always dig into the query that it provided, and you can download a CSV of data. So this might be useful, especially for someone like, our finance team or RevOps who want to take the data into a spreadsheet and do more work with it. You can also take the query into something like Metabase and then add it to your dashboard, which is really cool. Another type of question, this came from our engineering team. Do we have any data on GitHub issues? And if so, what repositories? So Dot was able to find our GitHub issue business table and then returned all of the repositories in a really easy to read list. And then you can continue to ask questions within the Slack thread and refine your answer if you have more questions about any one of those repositories or how many issues were created in the last X number of days. So really useful. And this is the type of question where if an engineer were to ask this and Anil and I weren't available, they might be waiting around for half a day to get an answer. Instead, they get an answer within a matter of seconds. So it's been super useful for especially our engineering teams. And then if you're worried about, like Anil and I, if you're worried about AI taking over the world.
Don't put my name on there. That was entirely you being concerned about this.
I had to make sure. So we asked Dot, are you a sentient being? I'm happy to report that Dot has assured us it has no consciousness or feelings, and so we were good to go. We're ready to roll this out. All right.
I similarly have no consciousness or feelings at this point. So, all right. Let's wrap this up here. I saw these in the DBT presentation this morning. Like, we got to have these arrows with questions. So can we scale our data with an AI chatbot? And here is all the payoff. We think so. I know that is not the most definitive information or the most definitive answer, but we do genuinely think so. And let's not sugarcoat it. There are currently challenges that we're dealing with. New technology, not always stable. When there's a ChatGPT outage, we run into problems. All right. We also overestimate the completeness of our documentation, and if anyone thinks that your documentation is perfect, this is also a great project in order to be very humbled. And finally, we haven't quite solved the problem for discovery of raw data. What we really focused on in the first part of this was our business layer. And we're actually working with the team that created this chatbot to try to create sort of a parallel instance so that we can do better data discovery on our raw data. But, let's be positive on some of our successes here. We've saved a lot of time on writing ad hoc queries for people. People popping into our DMs to ask very straightforward questions that are going to take you 5 minutes to write, not a big deal, but it's a huge distraction on your day. Second, it's enabled people outside of our data team to interact with the data. And finally, it's given us visibility into the questions being asked. All of these have been huge wins for our little team of 2 and our junior data analyst. And even on the days that we're down and having a rough day, we can always tell ourselves, we've got this. So thank you all very much. If you have any questions, we'll be at the booth. We'll be at the Airbyte booth the rest of the day. And thank you for joining us today.